Need to fix your hi-fi and don't have a ton of money? Speakers too thin? Amplifier too harsh? Maybe you're new to the hobby and don't even know where to start. Well, if you have $130, you just might be able to fix it. Today, we're talking about the Duke Audio T8 Pro. Kind of. It's an equalizer that's actually usable. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's fix your system for $130. When I say fix your system, let's use that word loosely. Chances are there is a lot going on with your system, and if it's got some issues, maybe some clarity issues, then EQing it really isn't going to make any difference. However, you can change the tone, the frequency response, and you can get an improvement, a huge improvement, and in some cases, all the improvement you'll ever need. EQs were pretty much ubiquitous in the 80s and 90s. Everybody had a component-wide EQ in their system, or at least most people did. Some of these EQs had crazy boosts and cuts, up to 15 dB. They had cool lights and everything. Unfortunately, this one doesn't have cool lights. However, it does have some tubes on top that do light up because of an LED underneath them. You may be asking yourself, doesn't Duke Audio have another EQ named the T8? This is kind of confusing, isn't it? Yeah, they do. Let's compare them. So this one says T8, and this one says T8. Maybe a little bit confusing. However, this T8 does not have a headphone amp, thankfully. This T8 has 7 bands of adjustment. This T8 has 5. Okay, so if you're looking at these, look for this, the headphone amp output. Personally, for me, I would skip this one. It's good, it's okay, but for $10 more, you're getting a lot more functionality. And the headphone amp in here isn't all that great anyway. So this is the old one, and they start adjustments at 64, and then they jump all the way up to 250, then to 1K, 4K, 10K. I actually did the review of this, and it's pretty good. It's decent. However, I didn't really love the frequencies that they chose, so my suggestion was, hey, can you at least change the frequencies around a little bit? And they actually added 2. Now, I'm not saying I designed this, I just had some input on it, and it sounds like they took some of my suggestions. Not all of them, we'll get to that later. So now we start at 50 Hertz, which I think is good. That's gonna fill out some bookshelf speakers a little bit better. Then you have 125 Hertz, which is also good. 315 Hertz, which I like too, because that's kind of like lower mid-range, upper bass, so you can kind of clean things up a lot if you have a little thickness on the bottom. Then you have a 750. I told them that 1K was okay, but maybe 750 and 2K would be better, because then you kind of have the Qs overlapping, and Q is how wide the frequency band is that you're adjusting. So you can have a wide Q or you can have a narrow Q. If you have a really narrow Q, then chances are it's just adjusting that frequency. If you have a broader Q, it's going to start adjusting frequencies around it. It always adjusts frequencies around it. However, it just depends upon how many frequencies it is adjusting depending upon the width of the Q. Having said all that, having an adjustment at 750 Hertz and 2K is very good for vocals, because you can kind of cover the entire vocal range with just those 2 frequencies. And then we have a 6K and 16K. So think of 16K as like air. Most of us watching this video or making this video probably have some hearing damage and hearing loss at 16K. Doesn't mean you can't hear 16K, it just means you can't hear it as well as other frequencies. So cranking up the 16K or cutting the frequencies behind 16K will oftentimes give us more information on top. Granted, there's not a ton of info at 16K and higher, but it does make things a little bit airier. So what's on the back? On the back, pretty straightforward. You have a balanced input and a single-ended input. Then you have a balanced output and a single-ended output. Then you have power connection. 12 volt. Comes with a little brick. 12 volt, 2 amp power brick. I know a lot of people, some people have 12 volt linear power supplies. So if you wanted to, you could hook up your 12 volt linear power supply to this EQ. On the front of here, you have a toggle. You either have it off, channel 1, channel 2. Channel 2 is single-ended. Channel 1 is balanced. And they say it's truly balanced, so I don't think that you can basically create a balanced signal. Well, I know you can't create a balanced signal, but you can't put in a single-ended RCA and then output a balanced. You can't input a balanced and then output a single-ended RCA because those channels, channel 1 and channel 2, are separated. So just think of this balanced and single-ended. Speaking of balance, over here you have a balance knob. Now you're gonna have to stick a screwdriver in there to mess with it. And these all have indents in the middle part of the range, which is nice. Not all knobs line up perfectly. So having a detent gives you basically a starting point. The balance pot here does have a detent in the middle and it does work. You just stick a screwdriver in, move it around. I don't know if they ran out of space or what, but it doesn't bother me because most of the time we're not adjusting balance too much. Next to the balance knob, you have a volume knob too, which I wasn't crazy about on this one, and I wish they would have just jettisoned it, gotten rid of it, but they did not. Which I guess that's good if you have just a straight up DAC that doesn't have volume control. And then you have a straight up headphone amp, but that probably has volume control. So I don't really know what the purpose of the volume control is. But there's one there and you can adjust it. I would suggest just turning it up and leaving it there. Let's talk about what I compared it to. So obviously I compared the T8 to the T8. T8 comparison. They really need to change one of these model numbers. Because how do you find it? You have to type in T8 and then click on the older T8 to be able to buy the T8 Pro, but it's labeled as T8. What about T9? What about T8.2? Or even 8.1? T11 teen. Now that would be a model number. Also compared this to the shit Lokius. Compared to the T8, the T8... compared to the T8 with 7 bands, the T8 Pro we'll call it. By the way, I am not linking the T8 in the description. I am only linking the T8 Pro because I don't know why you would buy the T8. Anyway, I found the T8 Pro to have more adjustments because it has more adjustments. I was able to dial in the sound a little bit better. I'm listening to these headphones, the Thiel Audio Wraith. Anyway, they're not awesome, but I wanted to see if I could dial in the sonics exactly the way I wanted. I was listening to Just One More Reason by Tracy Chapman. I wanted to clean up her vocals a little bit because that headphone's a little bit weird when it comes to mid-range clarity. I got it to kind of where I want it, and I don't think it's the EQ's fault. I think it's more the headphone's fault. Anyway, I got this to a place where I wanted it to, and I did need the 2K and the 750 adjustment to get it there, and then I cranked up a little bit of 6K and a little bit of 16K, but you don't care about that. I also felt like the T8 Pro was quieter because I turned the volume all the way up on this, didn't play any music, and then turned the volume all the way up on my Gishelli Labs Archel 3 Pro. I was also using the Gishelli Labs J2. I was also using the Weem Pro going out optical, digital optical into the J2, into the T8 Pro, into the Archel 3 Pro. A lot of pros in this one. This is not amateur hi-fi. This is professional hi-fi today. Then I also had this hooked up in a speaker system. I had it going between the Emotiva XD-A3, single-ended out of there, into this, and then this into the Rotel A11 Mark II. Then I had that connected to a pair of Q Acoustics 5040s. Okay, with that out of the way, I think this is quieter. I heard just a slight little bit of from inside this thing. I didn't really hear any noise from the Lokius either. I also didn't hear any degradation in the soundstage. A lot of times when you stick an EQ, not a lot of times, sometimes when you stick an EQ in the signal path, you can kind of mess up your soundstage a bit, but you can also compensate for that with a little bit of tone control to trick your brain into thinking that there's a bigger soundstage. little bit of sub bass and a little bit of 12 to 16K in that range. Makes it feel more open. When comparing all these, again, I would take the T8 Pro over the T8 from Duke Audio. Probably stick with the Lokius just because I have a little bit more trust in the Lokius, and the Lokius doesn't have tubes. So what are my final thoughts? When I was going back and forth with Duke Audio about the T8 EQ and what I thought would be good, what I thought could be changed on it, I said, take out the tubes. You don't need the tubes. They did not take out the tubes. They're right here. It's not because I hate tubes. I hate tube amplification, or I haven't found tube amplification that I like. I don't mind tubes in preamps or in EQs, except for in EQ. You're having a heck of a time putting this between your DAC and your headphone amp. In a speaker system, it's not that big of a deal, but it's not just because of the size either. They say they're using the 6H1N-BN tube. It's a Soviet tube. If you know in the comments if there's any other type of tubes that you can switch out with that, as far as like nomenclature goes, drop it in the comments. However, a quick Google search did show me that there's a few options for this type of tube. If you know any like GE equivalent or anything like that, pop it in the comments. So I think it's cool that they added 2 more bands of equalization. I think it's cool that they changed the frequencies where that equalization was at. I also think it's cool that they lost the headphone amp, because let's be frank, headphone amps are fairly inexpensive at this point, and there's no reason to pack something else into an EQ. They stuck with the tubes. We can't win them all. As it is at $130, if you're wanting to experiment a little bit, if you think your system has some deficiencies and you don't have a ton of money, I think this is a great way to spend $130 if it's burning a hole in your audiophile pocket. It's also a phenomenal way, if you're newer to the hobby, of figuring out where different things are at different frequencies. And when I say things, I'm talking about vocals, drums, bass drums, trumpets, vocals, sibilants. With an EQ, and especially an EQ with adjustments at these specific frequencies, you can really start to get to know your music and know what is where. Another thing about having an EQ and having some familiarity with where different things fall on the spectrum of the frequency range is you can start telling the deficiencies of a speaker or a headphone fairly quickly. Maybe deficiencies isn't the right word. You can start to tell how things sound differently when you have an EQ, and you adjust that EQ to getting it sounding like you like it, and then you know what response you like. Then you know what speakers are lacking or what they're giving you too much of, or amps, or headphones. So I love EQs for that reason. Now, this may not be a long-term companion with you. This may be something that you get and you play around with it. You maybe fix some speaker issues, but if anything, this little EQ may be teaching you stuff about your system that you didn't know, so that in the future you can make better purchasing decisions. It could hang out with you forever though. I think if your system is really affordable, chances are there's something, especially in really affordable speakers, there's something that can be done as far as boosting, cutting frequencies that's going to make it sound better. And for $130, I don't think you can go wrong. It's not perfect. Again, I wish they would lose the tubes, but for the price, you're getting balanced and single-ended inputs. You're getting 7 bands of equalization. You're getting tubes, if that's a bonus for you. And I think it's as quiet as the Lokius, but it has a little bit more adjustment. If you've got the budget, probably go with the Lokius. That comes in around $300, I think, though. But for $130, I think this is a good, if not great, EQ for your system. So, if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. You can use the links in the description. Most of those are affiliate links. You can sign up for Amazon Music, Tidal, or Rune. Links in the description. That's also an affiliate link. You can also buy me a cup of coffee down at the bottom of the video. There's a thanks button. You can put a couple of bucks in the tip jar, but don't feel compelled to buy me anything. So, don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen, maybe using your new T8 Pro equalizer. I will only link the T8 Pro equalizer. Don't get the T8 and then come saying, hey, This only has 5 bands of EQ. Make sure you get the one with 7 bands and no headphone amp. And fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.